The billionaire said the car was ready for the crusher. 12 days later, it broke the track record. The order had already been signed. The crusher was scheduled for a Thursday. The car was a 1971 Porsche 917K. The short-tail version, the one that had won Le Mans in 1970 and 1971, the one that Steve McQueen had filmed at 220 miles per hour, for a movie that people still watch because nothing made since has, looked like that. There were 11 917Ks left in the world. This would have become the 12th to disappear. The man who signed the order was Harlan Briggs III, billionaire, 64 years old, heir to an infrastructure company that had built more bridges than he had patience for anything mechanical, and a man who had decided that a car he could not get running was a car that was taking up space he needed. His facility manager had already called the salvage company. The date was set. And then, 9 days before the crusher was scheduled to arrive, a man named Isaac Holt showed up at the service gate, in a truck that had seen better decades. A 7-year-old girl in the back seat holding a stuffed brown bear named Cog, and a toolbox that looked like it had been to a war and come back. Harlan Briggs III told him he had 48 hours. He said that on a Monday. On a Friday, 10 days later, the car ran. And on day 12, at the Pembridge Circuit in South Carolina, in front of 81 people who had come to watch something else entirely, the 917K broke a track record that had stood for 19 years. Nobody had seen it coming. Nobody except the man who understood what the car was. Keep listening. This one does not waste your time. His name was Isaac Holt, 33 years old. He had a 2-day beard and hands that were specific in the way that hands get specific after years of working on things that require precision. He drove a 2001 Silverado with a bed liner that had been repaired twice, and a back seat that had a blanket on it for his daughter, and a small hook on the door where Cog usually hung when Nora had decided that Cog needed to see out the window. Nora was 7. She had her mother's eyes, which was a thing Isaac noticed every morning, and which he did not say out loud, but which he carried the way. You carry things that are both beautiful and difficult. Her mother's name had been Claire. She had died when Nora was 4, from an illness that had moved faster than anyone had been told it would. Nora kept a drawing Claire had made for her on the wall above her bed. A brown bear, round-bellied, with a red button nose, which Claire had drawn from memory on the back of a hospital menu on a Tuesday afternoon. And which was the reason Cog looked the way Cog looked, because Nora had described the drawing to Isaac when she was 5, and he had gone to 6 toy stores in 2 days until he found a bear that matched it, closely enough. Cog had been everywhere since. Cog attended school pickup. Cog sat in the truck cab. Cog had been present, tucked under Nora's arm, at the meeting with the school counselor, when the counselor had said that Nora was doing remarkably well, and that she had extraordinary resilience. And Isaac had nodded and looked at the floor, because he knew the resilience was real, and also knew the cost of it, and both of those things were true at the same time. He ran a small operation out of a rented bay in Rock Hill, South Carolina, which he shared with a man named Theodore Okafor, who made custom exhaust systems, and who called Isaac the Quiet Machine, which was his way of describing someone who produced results without producing noise. Isaac worked on old cars. Specifically, he worked on old cars that other people had given up on. Not as a philosophy, as a practice. He did not advertise this. It was simply what the phone calls that came to him were about. The call from Harlan Briggs III's facility had come through a chain of 3 people, the last of which was Theodore, who had heard from a restoration contact in Charlotte, who had heard from someone at a concours event in Greenville. The message had been passed in the way messages of this kind pass, with decreasing detail and increasing urgency, and by the time Theodore relayed it to Isaac at 7 in the morning on a Sunday, it was simply, There is a Porsche 9NK about to be destroyed, and someone gave them your name. Isaac had looked at his coffee. He had looked at Theodore. He had said, "A 917K?" "That's what they said," Theodore said. Isaac had looked at his coffee again for a moment. "I need to make Nora's breakfast first," he said. The Briggs estate in Aiken County, South Carolina, was 1,700 acres of land and 8 structures, one of which was a climate-controlled storage facility, large enough to house 47 vehicles, which was the number it currently housed. Harlan Briggs III did not drive most of them. He had acquired many of them from estate sales and bankruptcy auctions over a span of 20 years, which had given him a collection that was significant in breadth and uneven in depth, in the sense that he owned extraordinary things without always knowing precisely what made them extraordinary. The 917K was in Bay 31. It had been there for 11 years. The previous owner had acquired it from a European collector who had acquired it from a German racing team that had held it in storage since 1974, and the chain of ownership had produced, among other things, a documentation record that was incomplete in specific ways that made authentication difficult, and a car that had not run since 1973, and that had been assessed by 2 shops and 1 specialist over 11 years without anyone successfully reviving it. Harlan Briggs III had decided, sometime in the autumn of the previous year, that a car which could not be made to run after 11 years of trying was not a car. It was furniture. It was furniture taking up the space of 2 normal bays, and furniture that cost money to store and insurance to cover, and that had, as far as he was concerned, exceeded its period of reasonable opportunity. He had signed the crusher order on a Wednesday. His facility manager, a man named Owen Lark, who was 50 years old and careful, and who had been managing the estate's operations for 9 years, had made the call to the salvage company on a Thursday. And on a Friday, after making the call, Owen Lark had done a thing he did not entirely understand. He had sent a message to a contact in Charlotte, who knew a contact in Rock Hill, and the message was simply, "Before Thursday, if anyone can look at it." Owen Lark was not a sentimental man. He would not have described what he did as sentiment. He would have said it was operational due diligence. But what it was, underneath the operational language, was this. He had stood in Bay 31 and looked at the 917K and thought that some things should be given one more chance before they are gone forever. Isaac drove to Aiken County on Sunday afternoon. Nora sat in the back with Cog, who was, as of recently, wearing a small pair of miniature sunglasses that Nora had found in a party favor bag and had determined were Cog's. Cog's visibility was limited, but his style was enhanced. At the service gate, a guard named Marcus confirmed the appointment and called Owen Lark, who appeared within 4 minutes, a compact man with a clipboard and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and the bearing of someone who managed complicated things without making them complicated. "Mr. Holt," Owen said. "Isaac," Isaac said. Owen looked at the truck. He looked at Nora, who was studying the estate gate with professional interest. "Your daughter's welcome to wait inside," Owen said. "There's a seating area near the entrance, warm. I can have someone bring something." "She comes with me," Isaac said. Owen looked at Nora. "Have you seen a 917K before?" Owen said. Nora thought about this. "Cog hasn't," she said. Owen looked at Cog. Cog's sunglasses caught the afternoon light. "Then by all means," Owen said. Bay 31 was at the far end of the storage facility. They walked through 46 other cars to get there. Nora walked beside Isaac with Cog under one arm and said nothing, which was what she did in the presence of things she was taking seriously. She had her father's quality of silence, not absence, attention. The 917K sat without a cover. This was unusual. Most of the bays had covers on the cars. Owen had removed the cover the day before, he explained, without saying precisely why. Isaac stopped at the edge of the bay. He looked at the car. It was orange, Gulf racing orange, not a restoration color. The original livery faded unevenly in the way that original paint fades when it has lived through decades in different climates. The low-swept body, the flat nose, the massive rear haunches that gave the 917K its silhouette, which was unlike anything else in automotive history, because nothing else had been designed quite so specifically around the physics of going very fast and staying on the ground while doing it. Nora looked at it for a long time. "It's orange," she said. "It is," Isaac said. "Cog likes orange." She said. "Good," Isaac said. He walked around it once. He did not touch it. He walked slowly, looking at specific things in a specific order. Front splitter, wheel arches, rocker panels, engine access, rear body, undercarriage from a crouch at 2 different angles. He was not cataloging damage. He was reading a history. The history of where the car had been, what had happened to it, what had not happened to it, what it had been waiting to tell someone. Owen watched. He had seen mechanics look at cars for 30 years. He had not seen someone look at a car this way. It was not the look of assessment. It was the look of recognition. Isaac stood up from his second crouch. He looked at Owen. "Has the fuel system been drained?" he said. "In 2017, Owen said. "The second shop. And the coolant, same time. Engine turned by hand since then?" "Not to my knowledge." Isaac nodded. He did not look troubled by this. He looked focused, in the way that a man looks focused when he already knows a great deal and is confirming the last few things. "Can I come back tomorrow?" he said. "With my tools?" Owen said. "I'll call Mr. Briggs." Harlan Briggs III did not come to the phone. He sent a message through Owen. The message was, 48 hours. After that, the schedule holds. Isaac looked at the message on Owen's phone. He looked at the car. "Monday to Wednesday," he said. "That's what 48 hours gives you," Owen said. "I'll need a few more days," Isaac said. He said 48 hours, Owen said. He said it carefully, the way a man says something he is required to say, but would prefer were not true. Isaac looked at the car again. He looked at it for a long moment with the expression of a man running a very specific calculation. "All right," he said. "I'll start tomorrow." He found Nora near the front of the 917K. She had crouched down and was showing Cog the car's nose at close range, explaining something to him in a voice too low for Isaac to catch. "What are you telling him?" Isaac said. She looked up. "I told him this car was asleep," she said, "and that you're going to wake it up." Isaac crouched beside her. "I'm going to try," he said. "Cog thinks you will," she said. With that settled, she stood up and took Isaac's hand, and they walked back through 46 other cars toward the exit. Theodore Okafor was in the bay in Rock Hill at 8 in the morning on Monday when Isaac arrived with his full toolbox and a second case used specifically for engine work. Theodore was an early riser. He handed Isaac a coffee without being asked. "The 917, Theodore said. "The 917, Isaac said. "What's wrong with it?" Isaac drank the coffee. He set the cup on the workbench. "I don't know yet," he said. "But I have ideas." "How many ideas?" 3, Isaac said. "One is quick. One is medium. One is the kind of thing that takes all the time you have and then a little more." "Which one is it?" Theodore said. Isaac picked up the second case. He picked up the toolbox. "Probably the third," he said. Theodore watched him load the truck. "How long has that car been sitting?" Theodore said. "Since 1973, Isaac said. Theodore was quiet for a moment. "Isaac," he said. "Yeah," Isaac said. "That's 50 years, Theodore said. "I know," Isaac said. "That's not a car that's asleep," Theodore said. "That's a car that's been in a coma." Isaac got in the truck. He looked at Theodore through the window. "Coma patients wake up," he said. He drove to Aiken County. Cog was on the passenger's seat, sunglasses on, watching the road. The first thing was the fuel system. Not just drained, as Owen had said, but dry in the way that decades of dry air does to fuel system components. Seals contracted and cracked along stress points. The pump diaphragm stiffened and split at the inner edge. Not catastrophic, not quick. He worked through the fuel system in 4 hours. He cataloged every component he needed to replace. He photographed the originals before touching them, which was a habit from his work on documented cars. The photograph was the record, and the record was the proof that nothing had been altered without evidence. The second thing was the cooling system. Different problem. The 917K's cooling had been pressurized at some point in the years before Owen's team had drained it, and the pressure had done something interesting to one of the water pump Cecil in a way that was both unusual and, once you understood the 917's cooling architecture, entirely logical. Isaac sat with this for an hour. He did not rush the sitting. He made notes. He drew a diagram in his small spiral notebook. Not because he needed the diagram to understand the problem, but because the process of drawing it confirmed that his understanding was complete. The third thing was what took all the time you have, and then a little more. The engine itself was seized. Not from rust, which was what everyone assumed when an engine had been sitting for decades. From a specific and elegant kind of chemical adhesion between the piston rings and the cylinder walls that happened in aluminum alloy engines stored in humidity-variable conditions over very long periods. You could force it. You could break the adhesion with enough pressure. You could also, in doing so, score the cylinder walls in ways that would require the engine to be fully rebuilt before it ever ran. Isaac did not force it. He spent 3 hours on Tuesday evening researching the specific metallurgical conditions of the 917K's engine block, which he had done once before, in a different context, and which he now revisited with the specific question of the correct solvent penetration approach for this exact alloy under these exact conditions. He made 4 phone calls. One was to Benjamin Marsh in Chatham County, who had a library and a memory, and who said the right thing in the first 30 seconds, which was, "Slow, Isaac, slow and warm." He called Owen Lark at 9 that night. "I need more time," he said. "How much more?" Owen said. "The 48 hours is gone," Isaac said. "I need until the end of the week, 4 more days." Silence on the line. "I have to take that to Mr. Briggs," Owens said. "I know," Isaac said. He's not going to be easy about it," Owen said. "Tell him the car is worth more than what fee," Isaac said. "And tell him I haven't taken a cent yet." Owen called back at 10:15. He said, "End of the week, Friday, that's it." "Thank you, Owen," Isaac said. "Don't thank me," Owen said. "Thank me if it runs." Harlan Briggs III came to the bay on Wednesday afternoon. He had not intended to. He had been in the facility for another reason, a quarterly review of his vehicle insurance valuations, and his path had taken him past Bay 31, where Isaac was lying beneath the 917K on a creeper, and where Nora was sitting on a folding chair against the wall, Cog in her lap, doing homework. He stopped. He looked at the car. He looked at the man under it. He looked at the child doing homework. "Who let the child in?" he said. Owen, who was standing nearby, said, "She came with Mr. Holt." Harlan looked at Nora. Nora looked at him over her homework. Cog's sunglasses caught the fluorescent light. "What are you working on?" Harlan said. "Fractions," Nora said. "How is that going?" he said. "Thirds are fine," she said. "Fifths are still a problem." Harlan Briggs III was not a man who spent a great deal of time talking to 7-year-olds. He found he did not have an immediate answer. Isaac slid out from under the car on the creeper. He stood up. He wiped his hands on a cloth. He looked at Harlan Briggs III, who was 64 years old, tall, in pressed trousers, and a quarter zip in the Briggs Meridian corporate blue, and who had the expression of a man who owned 1,700 acres and was used to things going as directed. "Mr. Briggs," Isaac said. "You're Holt," Harlan said. "Isaac," he said. Harlan looked at the car. He looked at the open engine area, where Isaac's work was visible in the organized way of a man who kept his workspace the way he kept his thinking. Nothing random, nothing unaccounted for. Owen tells me you haven't invoiced anything, Harlan said. Not yet, Isaac said. Why not? Because the car hasn't run yet, Isaac said. Harlan was quiet for a moment. What's wrong with it? He said. Isaac told him. Not in simplified terms. In the actual terms. The fuel system, the cooling seal, the engine adhesion. He told him the approach and the timeline, and the specific reason each step had taken the time it took. He spoke the way he always spoke. Directly, without performance, without the implicit request for credit that lives in most explanations of complex things. Harlan listened. This surprised Isaac slightly. Not because he had low expectations of Harlan, but because listening was, in his experience, rarer than people acknowledged. The engine adhesion, Harlan said. You said you're treating it with penetration and heat cycling. Slow heat cycling, Isaac said. Over a period of days. It has to be gradual or you risk scoring the walls. How do you know the exact temperature range? Engineering data on the 917's alloy composition, cross-referenced with documented revival procedures for similar engines stored in comparable conditions. There's a limited literature on it. I found what existed. Harlan looked at the car. He looked at it for a long time. The last shop said it needed a full engine rebuild, he said. They quoted me $308,000. The engine doesn't need a rebuild, Isaac said. It needs patience. Something moved in Harlan's face. Not quite a shift. More like a crack in something that had been sealed a long time. What's it worth? He said. If it runs. A 917K in running documented condition, Isaac said, is worth between $14 and $19 million at auction, depending on provenance and the completeness of the documentation record. Harlan was quiet. The documentation record has gaps, he said. I know, Isaac said. I've been looking at what's there. I think some of the gaps can be filled from European racing archives. There are databases. I have a contact who works with them. He paused. That's a separate conversation. The first thing is to make it run. Harlan looked at Isaac. He looked at Nora, who had gone back to her fractions. He looked at Cog, who was watching the room with the impartial authority of a stuffed bear in miniature sunglasses. He said, "Take the time you need." He left the bay. Owen watched him go. He looked at Isaac with an expression that contained a number of things, the topmost of which was relief. That went better than I expected, Owen said. He's not unreasonable, Isaac said. He was just working with incomplete information. He went back under the car. On Thursday evening at 6:47, the piston rings broke free. Isaac was alone in the bay. Norris was at his neighbor's house for the evening. And he felt it through the breaker bar before he heard anything. A release that was not dramatic, not a bang or a crack, but the specific yielding of something that had been holding for a very long time and had finally decided to let go. He turned the engine by hand. It moved, stiffly at first, then with less resistance, then with the beginning of something that felt like fluency. He set the breaker bar down. He stood in the bay by himself with the 917K. It was very quiet. The fluorescent lights made a sound that lights make when a room is empty of everything else. He thought about Claire. He did not plan to. He thought about the way she had looked at things she loved, which was with total attention and no performance. She had looked at Nora that way from the first hour. She had looked at Isaac that way for 7 years before that. He had never told her, or had not told her enough, how much he had learned from watching her look at things that way. He picked up his phone. He took one photograph of the engine bay. He sent it to Theodore with no text. Theodore replied in 3 minutes. "Is that what I think it is?" Isaac replied, "Yeah." Theodore replied, "Get some sleep." Isaac locked the bay. He drove home. He made dinner for 1, which was what dinner was now, except on the days it was dinner for 2, and the 2 days were better, but the 1 days were not nothing. He had learned that. they were not nothing. He sat at the kitchen table. He did not turn on the television. He sat with his coffee and the small spiral notebook, and he wrote down everything that still needed to happen before the car would start. And the list was shorter now than it had been on Monday. And shorter was good, and he let that be what it was. The car ran for the first time on Friday evening. Not publicly. Just Isaac and Owen, who had stayed late for no reason he had articulated, and Nora, who had come with Isaac that afternoon, and who was on the folding chair with Cog, and who had, over the course of the week, developed a familiarity with Bay 31 that expressed itself as a settled, proprietary calm. Isaac had done the preliminary checks: fuel pressure, oil circulation, cooling flow. He had primed the system by hand. He had checked everything twice, not because he doubted himself, but because the car deserved it. He sat in the cockpit. The 917K cockpit was not designed for comfort. It was designed for the specific purpose of putting a person in physical contact with a car in a way that left no distance between the driver and machine's intentions. Isaac sat in it and he felt the geometry of it. This car, this specific car, built for Le Mans and run there, and then put away for 50 years, and now here. He turned the key. The flat 12 engine behind his head fired on the third crank. It was loud. It was very loud. It was the specific loudness of an engine that had not made noise in half a century making noise now. And it did not sound uncertain. It did not sound rough or reluctant or provisional. It sounded at idle like exactly what it was. A racing engine built to a specification that had, in 1970 and 1971, been the fastest thing at the fastest race in the world. Owen covered his ears. Then he uncovered them. He stood in the bay and let the sound be what it was. Nora did not cover her ears. She held Cog tighter. She watched her father in the cockpit of the orange car with an expression that Isaac would not see until later, when Owen showed him the photograph he had taken with his phone without thinking about it. The photograph of a 7-year-old girl in a folding chair with a stuffed bear in sunglasses, watching her father in a Porsche 917K that had just come back from the dead, with an expression that was not amazement and not pride, but something older and quieter than either. Something like certainty. Owen called Harlan Briggs III at 7:15 Friday evening. Harlan was at dinner. He excused himself from the table and stood in the corridor outside the restaurant and listened to Owen say, "It's running, Mr. Briggs. He got it running." There was a long pause. "How does it sound?" Harlan said. Owen looked toward the bay, though he could not see it from where he was standing. "Like it always should have," he said. The Pembridge Circuit in South Carolina was a private road course used for member track days and the occasional regional competition event. It was not a famous circuit. It was not the kind of place that made national headlines. It had, however, a class record for historic racing cars in the pre-1975 prototype division that had been set by a Porsche 908 19 years ago, and that had stood without serious challenge since. Harlan Briggs III had a membership at Pembridge. It was a social membership. He attended events. He knew people. He did not drive. He had, after the car ran on Friday, made a call to the events director and arranged for the 917K to be present at the following Sunday's member track day, which was 12 days after the crusher had been scheduled. Not for competition officially. For a demonstration run. Isaac had agreed to drive it. He had not driven a car at racing pace in 7 years. He had, before Nora, before Claire's illness, before Rock Hill and the rented bay and the one-man operation, driven in 4 seasons of regional historic racing with a record that was not famous and was not nothing. He did not think of it as a past identity. He thought of it as a set of skills he had not used recently. He used them on Sunday. He did 3 warm-up laps. The 917K was not a forgiving car. It did not tolerate approximation. It required a specific kind of conversation between the driver and the car that was conducted entirely through sensation, through what the steering communicated, what the chassis told you under braking, what the rear end said in the exit of a corner. Isaac had that conversation. He had it the way you have a conversation, with something you have understood for a long time, even if you have not spoken to it recently. On the fourth lap, he stopped talking and started listening. The lap time was posted at the end of the session by the Pembridge timing system. Owen saw it first. He was standing at the timing board with Nora, who was holding cog, and he looked at the number, and he said nothing for 3 seconds, which was long enough for Nora to look at the board too, and then look at Owen. "Is that good?" she said. Owen said, "That's the track record." Nora looked at the board. She looked at Cog. "Cog knew," she said. The car came back into the paddock. 81 people were there. Members, guests, family, the events director, a journalist from a regional automotive publication who had come to cover the member day and was quietly revising what he was going to write about. They had gathered at the pit exit. Not dramatically, not with ceremony. They had moved toward the car, the way people move towards something they want, to be near. Isaac climbed out. He was in a borrowed helmet and a borrowed fire suit and his own boots. He unclipped the helmet. He looked at the car. He put his hand on the roof of the 917K for a moment. One flat palm briefly, the way you might rest your hand on the shoulder of someone who has done something they were not sure they could do. He looked up. Nora was at the edge of the crowd, Cog under one arm, making her way through with the determined navigation of a 7-year-old who knows where she is going. She got through the last gap and she came to him, and she took his free hand without speaking. He looked down at her. "What do you think?" he said. She looked at the car. She looked at the people. She looked at the board, which was still displaying the time. "I think," she said, "that Cog wants to sit in it." He thought about this. "I think we can arrange that," he said. Harlan Briggs III was standing at the edge of the paddock. He had driven up from Aiken County for the session, which had not been certain until Friday, and which he had not told anyone he was attending until he was already there. He stood with Owen and said nothing for a long time. He watched the crowd around the car. He watched Isaac lift Nora into the 917K cockpit, where she sat with Cog on her lap and her legs straight out in front of her because she was 7 years old, and the cockpit was not designed for 7-year-olds, and she did not care in the slightest. He watched Nora show Cog the steering wheel. He watched Cog's sunglasses catch the afternoon light. He looked at Owen. "The documentation gaps," he said. "The European archives," Owen said. Isaac mentions a contact. "Set up a call," Harlan said. "This week." Owen made a note, and the crusher order, Harlan said. "Already cancelled," Owen said. "The morning after it ran." Harlan nodded. He looked at the 917K again. Nora was explaining something to Cog with great seriousness. The car was orange and low and impossibly shaped, and it had been scheduled to disappear forever on a Thursday, and instead it was here on a Sunday, with a child in the cockpit and a new lap record on the board, and 81 people standing in a paddock in South Carolina who had come to watch something else entirely and had seen this instead. Harlan Briggs III was not, as has been established, a sentimental man, but he stood in the paddock for a longer time than he needed to before he went back to his car. He stood there the way a man stands when he has been wrong about something important and is taking the time to be right about it now, which is one of the harder things people do and one of the more necessary. He left without making a speech. He did not need to make one. The boards had said what needed to be said, and the car had said the rest. Isaac drove home that evening, on the 2-lane that goes east from Pembridge, through the flat South Carolina low country, where the light in October goes long and amber and turns the roadside grass into something you would think was beautiful even on an ordinary day. Nora was in the back with Cog. She was asleep before they cleared the county line. One hand around Cog's middle, her head at the angle that heads go when they have decided the matter is settled. Isaac drove. He was not thinking about the lap time, though he would think about it later, precisely and with satisfaction. The way a craftsman thinks about work that has come out right. He was not thinking about the invoice he would send Monday morning, which would be fair, and which Harlan Briggs III would pay without discussion. He was not thinking about the European archives, or the documentation gaps, or what a fully authenticated 9/17K would eventually change for everyone who had been part of this. He was thinking about the hand on the roof, the single flat palm, briefly before the crowd came. What it had felt like to put his hand on, something that had been given up on, and that had not needed giving up on, and that had asked only for patience and for someone who knew how to listen. He thought about Claire. He thought about her, looking at things she loved with total attention and no performance. He thought about the drawing on the back of a hospital menu. Round belly, red button nose, and Cog in the passenger seat with his sunglasses on, watching the road the way he always watched the road, with the settled authority of a bear who has been to a great many places and expects to go to more. The road went on. The light went long. Nora breathed in the back seat, slow and even, and the truck went east through the amber grass and the evening, and the day closed behind them like water.